This week on Waxing the Porpoise, G-Baby and the usual suspect Steve are pleased to welcome back once again very special guest and friend of the show, dad of the show, Steve's dad, the Tomfather. Join us as we discuss the Tomfather's time as a Secret Service agent throughout the 1980s, where he was tasked with the protection of Jesse Jackson during his one of two presidential campaigns, the commander-in-chief himself at the time, Ronald Reagan, and other various high-level officials and foreign dignitaries. We'll hear about the reality of being a Secret Service member, from the perks to the day-to-day grind to the sacrifices that come with the territory, and hear more than a few interesting stories along the way. Pop quiz, hotshot. If the president offered you half a cookie, would you accept it?
Dan Marino should die of gonorrhea and rot in hell. Would you like a cookie, son?
Let's wax this shadowy porpoise.
Chase, don't do that.
See, we working on his brow chakra. We're just in back of the crown chakra.
All right, welcome to Waxing the Porpoise. We are back again on a double nickel, episode 55 this time, and yet again, a very special episode where we have part two of Steve's dad, Tom, the Tomfather, has joined us once again to talk about his career. Super excited to get into this. We teased last time about his time in the Secret Service, so this should be a fun one. So, do you have anything, Steve? Any housekeeping type stuff carry over that you wanted to get out of the way before we get into the main event?
No, nothing I can think of.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, we didn't have any new emails or anything like that. So yeah, we can just get right into it. So to introduce ourselves this evening, as always, you have myself, Jim G-Baby.
And what the hell is that smell?
And of course, to my virtual right, the usual suspect, Steve.
Hey man, Miami Wise is #1 new show.
Do you remember that?
No, what's that
Euro
from?
Trip?
I've never seen it.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn, I could have sworn you did. Yeah, they go on this Euro trip, and like they get the trip from like a really shady like travel agent, so they get dropped off in like Bratislava, and so they kind of it's a satire, kind of like a parody thing. So they play it up like they just got Miami Vice
Gotcha.
on their cable channels in like 2008. So he's like, Miami Vice, #1 new show. I think I confused you and Luke for that one, because that was one of those lines that it was sure to always get a chuckle along the same lines as "Wrong Kid Died."
Yeah,
from Dewey Cox. Okay, and then without further ado, once again we have returning champion Tom.
Get off my plane.
How's it going, Tom?
Good to see you guys.
Likewise, good to have you back. Steve, you want to start us off here on this journey through the Secret Service?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Pops, thanks again for coming back. We appreciate having you.
Yeah, always a good time.
We always enjoy hearing your crazy stories. I think the first thing I wanted to ask you was if you could give our listeners at home like a quick little history of what the Secret Service actually is, how it started, because it started as an extension of the Department of Treasury, right?
Yeah, it was under the Department of Treasury up until after 9/11 when they moved it over to Homeland Security.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
It's, the original charter, and this is going back to like 1865, I think. Their original job was to investigate counterfeiting, and kind of an odd fact, the Abraham Lincoln signed the executive orders, or signed the authorization, however you'd phrase it, creating the United States Secret Service just before he died. And
wow,
it was one of those crazy things in history. But yeah, the original job of the Secret Service was to investigate counterfeiting because, as I understand it, all the different states and banks in the 1860s were printing their own money. So you had a multitude of currencies floating around out there, and it was really easy to counterfeit. And so they needed one law enforcement agency to try to clean up, that problem, and until they got a central currency going. And so that was the job of the Secret Service. And then somewhere along the line, it morphed into they kept the counterfeiting investigation job, but then it morphed into executive protection, which is what most people think of when they think of the Secret Service, protecting the president, the vice president, and all those folks. So it's kind of a dual function, and still is, as far as I know, a dual function of executive protection and then some financial crimes, mostly counterfeiting.
So I had heard a long time ago, I don't know if you told me, if I read this somewhere else, but the transition happened in a really interesting way, from what I understand, where there were Secret Service agents staking out this bar, investigating some counterfeiting, and this was after Lincoln was assassinated, and these agents overheard a plot to steal Lincoln's body. And I think they felt like a strange connection to Lincoln because, like you said, he was the one who created the Secret Service. So
yeah,
they took it upon themselves to be like, okay, well, we're going to still investigate this counterfeiting operation, because I had heard somewhere, or I had it in my mind, that at that time, a third of all money in circulation was counterfeit. So it was a big problem.
Big problem.
Wow.
So yeah, the service agents were like, well, we don't abide by this. So, I don't know. You'll have to check that and let me know if I'm wrong or not, because it's a really cool story that they set up like a sting because they were going to steal the president's body and then use it for ransom or something.
Yeah.
And then after that, it sort of just stuck. But I don't think it officially became their duties until, I don't know, a number of years later. But I was wondering, that might not even be true. Could be something I just heard. But I thought that was kind of...
Yeah, nevertheless, it sounds interesting. Yeah, I probably should know the answer to that, but and maybe at one time I did, but not anymore.
Well, I imagine you would be the one to tell, because you also said that the Secret Service, at least at the time, was still responsible for investigating all crimes that were paper related. So it's not just currency forgery, right? It was other paper related.
Well, other kind of, to use kind of a blunt term, other currency related stuff.
Oh, okay.
It was counterfeiting, and it was credit card fraud, and a few other things, which always seemed to me to be kind of an odd mix of jurisdiction. It seems like you would give all the financial crime stuff over to the FBI because, they handle, bank fraud and bank robberies and, all that kind of stuff. But the Secret Service kept, a carve out of some financial crimes. And the only investigations I was involved in during my time there was counterfeiting. That's kind of their big financial crime focus. And then credit card fraud. It seemed like those two were the big ones. But I think they had a jurisdiction in some other areas. But those are the two big financial crimes that we used to be involved in.
I seem to remember you were telling me a story where you had to go arrest a guy across state lines, but you guys were all unmarked in civilian clothes, and you had to go through some sort of state checkpoint. Do you remember this?
Yeah. It's, it's just funny little things that come up like that. And I don't know if you remember John, my buddy at Secret Service. I'll leave his last name off, but I don't know if it was, I guess it was Reno PD had arrested somebody for passing counterfeit. So we drove up there to get him. The guy was cooperative. We're not driving black and whites. We're driving regular, cars. Matter of fact, the funny story about the cars we drove is that, the government, mostly DEA, seizes a lot of vehicles in their investigations, because if they can find drugs in a car, they take the car, right? And the drugs. And, so they had a lot full of all kinds of cars. And so we would go down and just pick out cars. And, every now and then they'd get, a real, a cool car like a Corvette or something. And of course, everybody wanted to drive that, but, so they were just run of the mill cars. So we drove up to Reno. We picked the guy up. We had him in what's called a transport belt, which is where you cuff him. You cuff him in the front because it's really uncomfortable, obviously, to ride with your hands cuffed behind you, but for a long period of time. So he's cuffed in the front, and then there's a belt, and he's cuffed to the belt, so he can't get his hands around you, because cuffing somebody in the front is just a terribly dangerous thing to do. Mm-hmm. So we had this guy in the back of the car, and he's got a transport belt on. He's got these cuffs on, and we're driving back to Sacramento, going to book him in the jail. And we go through that, fruit and agricultural inspection station. And I'm driving it. We drive up, and I roll the window down, and this inspector walks up, and he sticks his head in, and he looks in the back, and here's this guy sitting back there handcuffed. And he looks at me, and then he looks at John, and he looks at me again, and he says, "Are you transporting any fruit?" and I just looked at him, and I said, "No." And he just waved us on through, and John and I and the guy in the back, we're all laughing our heads off, because it was like, apparently he's not concerned that we're kidnapping you. He didn't ask us ID or nothing. Nothing. I mean, we're not, we're wearing jeans and polo shirts, and, and just, it was just, the whole scene was funny, and we drove away, laughing about it. But I think I told the boys that later, because it was just such an odd thing. It's like, here this, government official is, who's at an inspection station, and his job is to ask about fruit, and apparently he's unfazed by the fact that we're transporting a guy cuffed in the back of the car. So anyway, that was kind of funny.
Man. Yeah. Talk about, just towing the party line.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, he didn't have any other logic in him that was saying, "Are you guys government agents?" or,
Yeah. Either that, or he just didn't want to know. He just didn't want to know. It's like, move on.
That's a fair point too. I mean, even back then, you don't know who you're dealing with, because maybe he didn't want to eat a lead salad for asking the wrong kind of question too, so maybe it was actually a smart move.
Yeah. Self-preservation. I don't know. It was just a funny thing. So.
Yeah. I always thought about the guy in the back seat, like, wow, thanks so much for showing the slightest concern that you guys could be kidnapping me, taking me out to the desert to dump me somewhere. And he just wants to know if we have any pomegranates in the car.
Yeah.
The car thing you mentioned reminded me also, when you guys would do, maybe this was when you were a cop, when you would do stakeouts, you would sometimes use like florist vans that weren't real, but they would have legitimate like DMV entries associated with them. Does that sound familiar?
Say that again. We'd use what?
So if you guys were doing like recon, you would get a van that had some fictitious like florist company on the side. But if somebody had but the reason was why? Because if they had somebody who could run the plate at the DMV or something, it would come back to a legitimate, right? Is that right?
Yeah, you can do that. I think we probably had some of those, but yeah, you always got to be careful that, somebody, like you say, working at the DMV might have the boyfriend who's a drug dealer or whatever. So you're very protective of your plates and your ID. It's the same thing with law enforcement, and they probably still have it today. But if you're active duty law enforcement, state, federal, local, whatever it is, you can have your driver's license number and your license plate confidential. So, if a chippy pulls up behind you, pulls you over, whatever, and runs your plate, it's going to come back confidential. And that's going to be a tip off to the chippy that he probably just pulled over a cop, which is a great way to get out of a ticket, by the way.
Yeah.
But, the purpose of that is so the bad guys can't figure out by running your plate or running your driver's license where you live.
Wow.
And, So all those, so you're right, Stephen, to get back to your point that, the plates on the cars you use in surveillance are going to be, well, I don't know. They're not going to come back confidential because that in itself is a tip off, but they're going to come back to fictitious companies. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that means
that's pretty
that's had to
interesting.
have happened enough for that to be a countermeasure, which is
Yes.
pretty wild to think that you have to go that many layers deep to keep the cover, to keep the game up, Like,
Right.
I wouldn't have thought, I mean, even back in the 70s and 80s that criminals would be so on it,
Yeah.
like
Oh
that.
yeah.
That's
And
crazy.
it was the same way at Secret Service. All the plates on all of our cars, they were not government plates. You get behind cars that have government plates on them, and that's obvious. Ours were just
Right.
regular California plates, but they all came back to fictitious companies. And I
Wow.
think, Stephen, what you may be thinking of is one of the cars I drove for a while. The plate came back to some florist,
Oh, okay.
and it was a phony company, which I always thought was kind of funny because it had a funny name, and the boss of the office is the one who would make up all these fictitious companies, and he had a bit
The
of a sense of
Fleurs.
humor. It was something like that. It was crazy, But,
It's like De
Yeah.
Niro in Meet the Parents. His cover
Yes.
that he's a florist. He's like, "Oh, you don't know shit about flowers."
yeah,
Well,
Brings him
that's
that really rare tulip, whatever.
yeah.
He's like,
Yeah.
"Wow, thanks, great."
funny stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've always kind of heard is some of these weird rumors about the Secret Service, like, the president can never be more than 10 miles away from a trauma center, or like they travel with blood. Or have you heard any crazy theories like that aren't true, or are there any that are true? Like he can never be within 10 miles of whoever, or
I've never heard that. Although they do have doctors traveling,
Mm.
and it wouldn't be unusual to have medical kits, including blood.
Mm.
And things like that. That's not unusual. That's just good pre-planning.
Yeah.
But the president can go wherever he wants. So if you heard that he's going to be 10 miles from a trauma center, they go wherever they want. And when they're campaigning, think about some of the places they go when they're campaigning, like Iowa.
Yeah.
Some cornfield in Iowa. You're a bit of a trek from a trauma center. But they will always have the routes planned. Of course, if something bad happens, how do we get to the closest hospital? They may have helicopters on standby, life flight type helicopters. Medical people traveling. It's not unusual in a motorcade to see. In the old days, they used to have ambulances in the motorcade, but they've kind of gotten a little more subtle, and they'll have like an SUV, but it'll have paramedics, and it'll have blood, and it'll have, whatever you need. So, that kind of stuff is true. But I can't think of any, crazy rumors I've heard that aren't true. Probably if you think of something crazy, it probably is true.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. And the craziest stuff is probably stuff you haven't heard about.
yeah. Exactly.
If I can interject real quick, I'm curious about like the timeline. And is this when you started working for the Secret Service? Is this before you had Steve and his brother, or after or during?
Oh, well, that's kind of interesting actually, because, it's what my goal was when I started in law enforcement right out of college in 1978. My plan, 'cause I had a bachelor's degree in business. My plan was to go about 5 years in local law enforcement and then apply to a federal agency and probably FBI. That was kind of my goal. It's like get 5 years on the street and then, go FBI. And so probably about 5 years in, before I was married, but before we had kids, I actually applied to the FBI, and my wife and I Stephen's mother, went down to Sacramento and had an interview with a recruiter, which was very disappointing. Interesting guy. He was being brutally honest, and he was in the middle. He had been like 17 years in Sacramento, and he was getting transferred to like Detroit or something.
Oh man!
And so he was at a transition. It's like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay here? Am I going to stay with the FBI? My kids are in school. And he was just kind of laying out. This is the life. This is what happens. And he had some other discouraging things. So we drove back, and and I thought, I don't know. It just didn't seem like a good route to go. Mm-hmm. But about the same time that was going on, I would occasionally work cases with a field agent, a Secret Service agent out of the Sacramento field office, who would come up and work protective intelligence cases in town, and I would hook up with him. And typically, what happens is, if the Secret Service gets information that somebody has made a threat to the president, usually it's the president, it could be the vice president, but it's usually somebody's threatening to kill the president. Mm-hmm. The agent in that jurisdiction will get the case, and they'll go up and they'll interview the guy, fingerprint him, photograph him, not arrest him necessarily, but go through all that process to identify them, and then try to really identify, is this guy really a threat? But so these agents are going up to towns all over the place where they're not in uniform, so it's dangerous. So they always hook up with a local uniformed police officer to go with them. And the guy out of the Sacramento office, I probably worked, 3 or 4 protective intelligence cases with him. And whenever he would come up into town, he would ask for me. And we would get together, he'd say, I got to come up and I got to interview some guy, and so when you're working, let's get together, and we do it together. And so he was the one who really encouraged me to apply to the Secret Service.
Wow, okay.
And so when I applied, I had no kids. And then a short time later, my first son comes along, because the process of taking the test and then going through the background investigation literally takes forever. It takes a good year for them to do a background on you, and it's very extensive.
Fully vet you, yeah, I'm sure. It's
completely,
involved.
Because didn't they
that took time. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, didn't they go and interview like childhood neighbors of yours, people you hadn't seen in decades,
high school
like
basketball coach?
Yeah, they go way back, right?
Damn.
Oh, they dig deep. Yeah, they dig deep. And so there's that. That takes a long time. And then about the time that was kind of, well, not only do they do that, but then they send you to all kinds of different doctors for all these things. And I remember one time they sent me to, I think it was an allergist. My wife would remember this. It was a very kind of unique specialty. They sent me to this allergist, but he must have been a pediatric allergist, because when I went in his office, it was all full of little chairs, and it had, elephants ABCs, painted around the walls. Exactly. And it was just kind of a hoot to be there. But anyway, you get all through that, and then the government had a hiring freeze on for like a year or so. So anyway, by the time they actually offered me a job, I had, my first son was 2+ years old, so It was the different dynamic. And as a matter of fact, they offered me the job once. I can't remember what year it was. And I actually turned him down. And I thought, I don't know if I want to go that route. And, but anyway.
And was this first offer? This was you were going for the regional office in Sacramento?
Well, you get hired in the Secret Service, and then they'll stick you in the closest office where you get hired out of. So yes, and so anyway, they offered me a job, and I said no. And, but that same agent kept in touch with me, and then things changed over the next, 6 or 8 months. And, he came back again and said, well, just checking to see if you're still, not interested. And at that point, I had changed my mind. And so one thing led to another, and we ended up moving down to Sacramento and went, I went to work for the Secret Service out of the Sacramento field office. So
Cool.
that's, it's kind of how that came about, but it's a long process. I mean, you cannot be in a hurry to get to get a job like that.
And I'm curious too, is this like during this time, do they have a regional field office in most big cities or like most capital cities, say?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Across the country? So like Seattle, Sacramento, Las Vegas, Tulsa, like that kind of
all
thing?
of them. Yeah, all of them. They would have what they called, I guess they were field offices. And then sometimes they would have little satellite offices. We had one of our guys that was assigned to the Sacramento field office, but he worked out of a desk in Stockton at Stockton PD.
Ugh.
And, because that's a busy area for counterfeiting.
Yeah, I bet.
And this guy loved to work counterfeiting and didn't like to do protection. So they kind of just let him liaison with Stockton PD and all, San Joaquin County and all that area down there. And, he did that kind of stuff. But they had people embedded, believe it or not, they had people embedded in Bakersfield and, lots of they're just all over the place.
Huh.
So,
yeah, wherever the.
So sorry,
need,
go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say wherever the need arises.
Yeah, they just have personnel everywhere, but you're traveling so much that rumor was I had a desk in the Sacramento field office, but I was hardly ever there. So.
That's where I got my mail.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious. So is like that the equivalent? I'm like thinking of like kind of like a farm system of like the minor leagues or even just like major league teams, but then is like getting called up and going to the show. That's like a presidential level, or like when you're in the District of Columbia, it's like another echelon of the Secret Service that you get into. And was that something that was very competitive, or or was that like more of a younger guy's game that was trying to strive for that?
Yeah, I think probably all those things factor in. If you're new, they're not going to put you on Presidential Protection Division. But as you gain experience, you'll work your way up to different protection divisions. But it's the way they work it is, there will be, like, take the president, for example, there will be a detail on him. That's all they do is him.
That's
but then there's
for his whole for his time in office. They try to keep. I'm sure they wanted to keep cohesion with a solid
to the extent you can. People come and go, but so they'll have the detail on him, and then there's rings of security that move out from there, and so you can be permanently assigned to various rings. But what they do a lot of times is they will bring in, depending on where the president's traveling, they'll bring in agents from all of those geographic areas.
Gotcha.
So I was only a few weeks on the job when I got assigned to a Reagan visit in Reno, I think it was. And wow. I'm a fairly new agent, and I'm 10 feet away from Ronald Reagan, and it was a thrill.
Wow.
It was really a thrill.
I can only imagine. When did he get shot? Was that in
it was 81?
81? Okay.
That happened to be Reno. I was 11 feet away when I
yeah.
I'm curious. I don't remember my history where that happened. I feel like it had to have been East Coast, but
it was L.A., I believe.
Was it?
I have to think for a minute. No. He was in Washington. He was in D.C. Wow. I had a brain fade for a minute, but yeah, he was in D.C. Yeah, because the hospital they rushed him to was in D.C. It was a trauma center. Unfortunately, they did a lot of gunshot wounds being in Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
and the emergency room physician saw the little brown spot under his arm and knew that was an entry wound for a gunshot.
Oh,
So
wow.
Damn.
a doctor who didn't see a lot of gunshots might have missed that or misdiagnosed it, but this guy knew exactly what that was. It was small caliber. Hinckley was shooting a 22, which is an absolutely deadly weapon. And but this emergency room doctor picked it up quickly, saved his life. So,
Wow. Sorry to derail you. You were talking about your first. You were pretty young on the scene, and he came into Reno. What do
Yeah.
you remember? What year this is?
It would have been 86.
86.
Let's see, is that right? Yeah, 1986. Yeah.
And that was just before Steve-O was born-ish, right? When were you born? 87 or
87. 87.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stephen was not on the scene yet.
No, I came later and ruined everything.
Not a bit.
So
Not a
going
bit.
back to the vetting process for recruits, I was reading that of all federal agencies like the FBI and the NSA and the CIA, the Secret Service is the only one that's never been infiltrated by a ne'er-do-well, if you will. Like, there's never been a double, like, no agent has like betrayed, and you would think that that would be the goal because they get closest to the most high value people. So,
Yeah.
I mean, kind of goes.
Are you or are you not the Black Angel of Death?
So whatever they're doing in their vetting process, it seems to be working. But
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But so what was the training like? Did you have to go? I'm picturing like a boot camp kind of situation where,
Yeah, good question.
or like an academy. Is it more like one than the other? I imagine the training's got to be pretty intense.
Yeah. So, without getting into too many specifics, they ship you off first to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, which they use the acronym FLETC, in Georgia, southern part of Georgia. And it's a huge campus. As I was told, it's a former naval base where they used to train submarine crews. And so it's an interesting place. It's enormous. Number one, a lot of land and a lot of buildings, and a lot of the very large hangar type buildings they have there have no windows. And it was part of the submarine training, as I was told, that you go into these buildings where they can make them completely black. There's no windows anywhere, which makes for a great indoor shooting range because you can, completely control the lighting. So anyway, you do X number of weeks there, and that's kind of a generic law enforcement academy type setting, but you've got 60 some odd federal law enforcement agencies that train there. I think every federal law, I saw walls of badges for federal law enforcement agencies I never even knew existed.
Wow.
And, Supreme Court police and, just weird stuff, But every federal law enforcement just about every federal law enforcement agency will train there except for FBI. They go out to Quantico, and then CIA has the farm. And I don't, but I think all the others train out at FLETC. And then from there, you go off to your respective agencies for more specific, training for that agency. Like I went off to DC for quite a while, training at the Secret Service school, I guess you'd call it. So
was your focus on I know you alluded to the counterfeiting. Was that mainly your bread and butter? And then when these times when the president was on the campaign trail or happened to be in a certain region, there were times that you got called in as support?
Yeah, so you have the dual function, right? And but for me, it was kind of the opposite. And I don't really think my situation was too unique, but I enjoyed the protection aspect. And so the boss in my office, knew that, and he knew some of the older guys they didn't want it. They were tired of traveling. And, so my situation was I was gone on a protection detail 90% of the time. And then, the time, maybe 80, 90% of the time. And then those times when I was back in the office, I would participate in counterfeit investigations, whatever happened to be going on. But that was a small part. And I didn't have a lot of investigations of my own because I was gone all the time. I would, if they did assign me cases, and I would get these cases and I'd start to work them up, and then I'd be gone for 3 weeks, and then you come back and you have to blow the dust off your case file and figure out what you were doing and where you were, work it for a week, and then you're gone for another 3 weeks.
Wow.
So, they didn't give me a lot of big cases because I was just never there. And that was an agreement between me and the boss. I mean, I would help other agents on their credit card forgery or their counterfeiting cases, but otherwise it was kind of like, leave me alone because I want the next trip that's coming up. And there's a ton of protection details out there because it isn't just the president. I mean, he's kind of the, most well-known guy. And depending on the president, a lot of them travel a lot. Some of them don't travel much, but you have the president, you have the vice president, and then you have all these foreign dignitaries that come into the country. And if you're a head of government or a head of state, you get Secret Service protection. Like if it was the Queen of England coming in, she's a head of state. Or if it was the Prime Minister of the UK, I guess, coming in, that's a head of government. And so you have tons of foreign dignitaries that travel in the United States, and they all get details, protection details. And then if there's somebody else that the president wants to have a protection detail, they'll get it assigned. Like the Treasury Secretary, I'm trying to remember how this went, but James Baker was the Treasury Secretary back in the day. And then I think he became Secretary of State. And Secretary of State usually gets State Department Dignitary Protection Division. But James Baker, having been Treasury Secretary, he had a Secret Service detail because we're Treasury. And when he went over to State Department, he told the president, his good buddy, I want a Secret Service detail. And the president said, you got it. So, and then every 4 years, of course, you have an election, and every candidate, I'll call him a viable candidate, every viable candidate gets a protection detail at some point in the campaign, some more early than others if they have a high threat level, and then some maybe a little closer to the convention. But if the election's in November, most candidates will have a detail by like January or February that will work them all the way through to the convention. And then if they're nominated, work them all the way through to the election. And then if they get elected president, that candidate detail turns it over to PPD, Presidential Protection Division, if they won the election. If they lost the election, the Secret Service detail goes home, literally just walks out the door.
Wow.
So it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it sounds like there's no shortage of opportunities then when you put it in that context with all the different high-level government officials and things.
Well,
does that spill over to like governors and stuff, like state governors and that kind of level too, or do they have their own state level?
They have their own. Like California used to have state police, but that was merged into CHP many years ago. So the governor's protection detail is provided by CHP.
Gotcha.
They have a government, probably what they call.
They have their own division within whatever state's highway patrol. That's what it's
some kind of executive protection division.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in previous presidents, they get protection for life, right?
Oh yeah.
What about their families? Because it's also their families, not just the person, right?
Like immediate.
Well, a former president, and I'm going to tell you what my best knowledge is. It could have changed, but I don't think it is. But the former president gets protection for life. And it used to be the former president and their spouse would get it for life. But many years ago, they took the spouse off. And so
Budget cuts.
yeah, so I get, so, like right now, I would imagine, Bush maybe still has a detail, Clinton, Obama, that type of thing. An interesting thing, when Richard Nixon resigned in,
that seems like it'd be thorny.
73, I think, is that when he resigned? Anyway, so when he resigned, he had a protection detail, presidential protection. It's called a former detail at that point because you're a former president, but that's just the name they give it. He had a protection detail, and then not too long after he left office, he signed off. He went without, which I always thought was kind of an interesting thing.
You can elect to just be like, nah, I'm good.
At some point, you probably can. If you're a fresh former president, I don't think that would be a wise thing to do because you're still a pretty heavy kidnap threat.
Yeah.
Because you still know a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But when you've been out of office, 3 to 5 years, China knows everything you used to know, so you could probably walk away from it at that point. But he's the only one I ever heard of that, dismissed his protection detail. As far as I know, all the others still have one.
Can we circle back real quick? One of the things I wanted to ask you talked about evaluating threats, like credibility, like, oh yeah, this guy's just a crackpot who's just writing a manifesto in his cabin in the woods, or this guy's a legit threat.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can go into much about like what's the calculus for determining how much of a threat somebody actually is versus just kind of a blowhard.
Yeah, I mean it's probably, as you would imagine, it's multifaceted. I mean, you're going to look at the whole picture. So, a lot of the threats that I worked were guys who were drunk, said something in a bar, somebody hears it, they drop a dime on them, and next thing you know, they got Secret Service knocking at the door. Maybe they're married, they've got kids, they got a stable job, they just said something stupid in a bar. You look at everything and, you make the best determination you can, as opposed to, maybe somebody who's a little more radical. Maybe it's multiple threats. Do they have the money to buy a plane ticket to even fly to DC to, go shoot the president? It's a somewhat of a sophisticated undertaking to take out a government official. So you kind of have the wherewithal, to do it. And most of the people that we investigated, I would say, were just kind of crackpots. Yeah. But you don't stop watching them though. And Secret Service may keep an eye on them for years afterwards, which was not an unusual thing to happen. That we had cases on people who had made a threat of one, degree or another, and, they get Secret Service, they get slid under the microscope for years. At some point, you may just blow it off and go, okay, we're done with this guy. He's whatever. But it's a good way to make a friend for life.
Yeah. I can't even imagine how difficult it must be now with technology. I mean, I feel like it's probably a double-edged sword. Like, it probably helps sort of aggregate all of this data of all these different people, but I could see it creating another avenue for even more people to come up on the radar.
Oh, yeah.
Social media, like offhanded comments, like, great, now we have 10,000 more people who made some flippant remark that we have to look into. But I could also see the data, like the technology being really helpful for if this one guy, his name keeps popping up over and over, it could trigger some kind of algorithm or something. But
yeah. Well, you don't want to be the agent who investigated some guy who made a threat and then come back and say, yeah, the guy's no threat, right. And then the next thing you know, he shows up at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But
that's like the worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like you hear that too, where some guy. I feel like not a couple years ago there was the guy who was able to hop the fence at the White House and run in, and he got pretty close
Oh,
to the
yeah.
actual White House. And I think when they looked him
Yeah.
up, they're like, "Yeah, he was kind of on our radar from years ago, but just like a tiny little blip."
Wow.
And then just like that,
Yeah.
he hops the fence and made it almost inside. And I think one agent was like asleep or something. It didn't look good, but
Damn.
Yeah, it's well, you got two things at play at the White House. You've got two different groups within the Secret Service. Well, there's multiple groups within the Secret Service, but you have the regular agents, Secret Service agents, and then you have Secret Service Uniform Division, and a lot of the security at the White House, you'll see these guys in uniform and their uniform division. So they're not agents, but they are part of the Secret Service, but it's just different. And if they screw up, the media just says, well, Secret Service screwed up. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess,
but they're like the
it's
JV
uniform.
squad.
Yeah,
Like
I don't.
a lower tier.
Well, I hate to use that term, but if you had asked me when I was an agent, I would have said, yeah, they're them,
It's like
although, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say it's like the different military branches that all think the others are kind of less than,
Yeah.
Yeah, or it's like when I was a cop, we all look down on CHP, they're not real
Yeah.
cops, it's just, but it's that, kind of interagency, rivalry. But within the uniform division, you have some real badass, groups, because they provide, along with the military, we would supplement a lot of our security with Marines, and tough guys. But the uniform division would provide our snipers, our counter snipers, what they call them, CS teams, counter sniper teams. And, you'll see the guys on top of the White House and with their long range guns, but they're all over the area. They're not only on the White House looking away, they're away looking at the White House, so you got counter snipers everywhere. And then they travel with the president. So you got counter sniper teams out there, and they're provided by uniform division. A lot of the uniform division, guys will have bomb and drug sniffing dogs. And, so there's a lot of different, groups within uniform division, within Secret Service. So,
being a logistics guy, one of the things that I always think about that's not very sexy, but like when I hear about all these different agencies and then arms, and then there's like these subdivisions within, it's like it seems like a monumental undertaking to coordinate like travel, who's going to be with who, which team's going to be tasked with this area to these individuals, like all of that. Just and for everything to work in concert like that, it seems, and I mean for the most part goes off without a hitch, or else people will be dying probably left, right, front, and center. But I was thinking about that. Like, it's like, gosh, there's so much like the levels of bureaucracy and just everything to keep that going and intact. Seems like just kind of mind boggling that anything gets done at all.
Yeah, I can tell you the logistics department of Secret Service were just rock stars. I mean, they were handling, hundreds and hundreds of agents traveling all over the country, for different details, and all those details are moving with that protectee. And, you've got motorcades and helicopters and motorcycles, and you're coordinating with, local PDs, and, the agents have to have a place to, hotel to sleep at night, and, cars to drive, so it was just huge.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a lot of that's kind of like, you don't think about it, but it's all got to happen perfectly in that web, like in the background for things to go off without a hitch. It's just wild.
I was always impressed. They did a good job.
Yeah, to make sure you got the right number of cars, and like these people are here, and then all the way down to the really unsexy stuff, like making sure they got a place to stay and eat, and making, because I'm sure even one or two of those things you mess up and it's like a domino effect. And
Yeah.
especially if you're on like a campaign trail for like 5,
Yes.
6 months, keeping that machine running seems insane. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, getting to something more sexy. I'm thinking, have you ever had, one is any kind of jurisdictional pissing match kind of thing between any of these different agencies or different rings, as you alluded to, like that come to mind?
You know, we had
headbutting kind of stuff.
I'm sure some of that went on, it's just probably unavoidable, but, mostly what I dealt with were, the other agents in my group. And then when you would go into a jurisdiction, if your protectee was going into, like say, you're going to fly into Dallas or something, we had really good cooperation with all the police departments, highway patrols, departments of public safety. They were great. I mean, we did a lot of traveling in New York, and I was really impressed by the NYPD, the officers there that we dealt with. Very professional, all across the country, and a lot of departments will use a visit of a dignitary as a training platform. And because I remember one time flying into, we flew into Dallas Fort Worth, and it was when I was working campaign trail and I was assigned to Jesse Jackson. And the Secret Service put a detail on Jesse Jackson really early in the campaign because he had such a high threat level.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
But we flew into Dallas Fort Worth, and we were supposed to motorcade from there. We talk about logistics. When the plane lands, you have to have the motorcade ready to go. It's anyway,
like right
there, right at the base of the stairs. You don't want to be wandering around going, "Hey, where's my ride?"
Yeah.
Wasn't somebody supposed to pick me up here? Yeah. But we get to Dallas, and it's cold. I remember it was winter, but anyway, we come down the stairs, get in the motorcade, and Dallas Fort Worth, or the metro area or whatever, Dallas PD, they had brought out probably no less than like 50 motor cops.
Damn.
And they were escorting the motorcade on a freeway. And the way they do it is almost like a ballet, because you'll have the lead. If you think of like 50 motors side by side, you're going to have it 25 deep. And as you get up onto the freeway, the top two will motor up, peel off, and block an on-ramp. And then another two will go up and they'll block an off-ramp because you don't want somebody coming up the off-ramp. Mm-hmm. And so you have this ballet where this line of motors are leapfrogging, blocking on-ramps, blocking off-ramps. And then when the motorcade passes, they circle back in, past the motorcade, and they go into the back of the line. And it's a thing to watch, but you can't get that kind of training just running, 50 motors out there so they would take, visits, dignitary visits like this as a training exercise, not necessarily because Jesse Jackson needed 50 motor cops, to run his motorcade, but they saw it as a training tool. And I saw that a lot across the country. Let me turn that off. Where,
we don't want name.
It's your brother, Steven. So,
wow.
But anyway, so I saw
Pick
that a lot across.
Have him remote in. That'd be fun. Just Steve's like, no.
Crazy.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
That's C.S. Lewis.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I pulled it. I know it from a movie, The Usual Suspects.
Yeah. He says the devil wants to make sure, you either think he's everywhere or he's nowhere. He's fine with either of those.
Yep.
But
it's funny that
I wish I had
Dallas
that poem.
story.
The devil is a liar. Sorry.
I can't help but wonder if Dallas is maybe overcompensating in the presidential security department so they don't get another one killed in their city.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Not again.
Point. I'll tell you a funny story about that. Speaking of, presidential assassinations in Dallas. I was working a protectee one time at, it may have been Jackson. I'm not really sure. I can't remember who, but we worked him into this town, Dallas, at night. And so you couldn't see anything. It's all dark, of course. We work him into the hotel, get him all situated, and then the agents I was with, we could crash for a while, and then we had to be back first thing in the morning because there was night shift watching him. And anyway, I go into the command post, which is in a hotel room near the protectees hotel room. I go in the command post. It's sunrise. And my shift leader is standing by the window of the hotel looking out the window. And the sun is just coming up. And he says, hey, come over here for a second. So I walk over and he goes, look out the window. And I look out the window. He goes, what do you see? And I look out the window. And it was one of these things where your brain starts to work in slow motion. I'm in a hotel and the window, I'm looking down on Dealey Plaza where John Kennedy had been shot in 1963. Wow. And all of a sudden, all these pictures and movies and stuff I'd seen of the road and where it makes the turn and the Texas School Book Depository where Oswald was shooting from, the whole thing, it's like the fog starts to clear, as I'm watching this. And it was like, wow, what a weird thing that, I'm a Secret Service agent and I'm standing in this hotel looking at Dealey Plaza where, history, took place in 1963. Anyway, it was just one of those surreal moments.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's got to be super surreal to see that. Like, it's funny. I know people from Texas, and they're like, "Yeah, Dealey Plaza, whatever," because they've grown up there, and it's just part of the city in the background. But yeah, to see it like that for the first time in that light, that sounds pretty
cool,
transformative.
Are there any other things that, looking back, because obviously looking back at that assassination, driving through town with an open top vehicle is probably not a very smart thing to do. Do you ever look back at certain situations?
Are we going to get tinfoil hat going right now?
No, just like tactics, looking back like, ooh, that's not smart to let this guy in close, or, because you're always learning. I'm wondering if you look back at anything, any old stuff and like lessons learned.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stuff about like, me, I like a good conspiracy, and I've heard a lot of stuff behind like maybe not former Secret Service, but former law enforcement and military, and how they've kind of looked at this and dissected like this row of buildings here, these windows, we would have had agents right there or a sharpshooter here. The way the top down, the way that he did that slow turn around that like dog leg, they never would have gone that route because it exposed him going like 5 miles an hour. We would have let him hit this spot. Like, yeah, I'm curious too about like what your take, Tom, would be on that kind of thing too. Like as an armchair quarterback, like, were there things that you see that are pretty glaring, like they shouldn't have done that? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Sorry, I stepped all over what you were saying, Steve. But
no, I want to hear the answer. I just meant in general, like if you look at old pictures or film, like, oh, they're letting that crowd get too close, or they're not checking these guys.
Yeah,
just anything like that.
Whenever there's an incident, of course, the Kennedy assassination was huge, and the reforms within Secret Service that came out of that were, extensive. Just like after Reagan was shot, they changed a number of things. I mean, look how close the crowd was to Reagan when he was shot. I mean, 20 feet away? So, they always do an extensive debrief, but herein lies the problem with protecting a dignitary in the United States. And that is, if Secret Service had their way, they would put the protectee in an armored personnel carrier, with tanks around him, we'd have the Night Stalkers flying low over the motorcade with their 50 caliber machine guns ready to go. I mean, you know, you wouldn't let them get near a crowd. You wouldn't have any open arrivals. You would, you know, so if the Secret Service had their way, it would be total and complete protection, removing every possible threat you could think of. Well, if you're a politician, you want the opposite. You want to be kissing babies and shaking hands and, you know, working the crowd and, you know, waving out the window. And, you know, so there's always a tension. And, you know, you were talking about button heads with other law enforcement agencies. I saw a lot more head butting going on with the protectee, where they wanted to go for a jog at, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning and run through some park so they could meet people. And it's like, we're not doing that. No, we're not, you know, we're not here, not now, not then, you know. And so I probably saw, you know, that our shift leader, our detail leader probably had more, not arguments, but more discussions with protectees over, you know, kind of you want to do what?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we will try to compromise and, you know, come up with something, but it's a real tension because, you know, if you're running for office and they're always, no matter what job you have, you're always running for office, it seems like, even if you're a second term president.
Right.
And so they want to be out in the crowd. They want to, you know, grip and grin and, you know, like I said, do all that kind of stuff. So there's always a trade-off, but anytime there's an incident, usually, and even if nothing happens, but there's some kind of incident, they will always go back and debrief. And how can we make it better, but still provide the protectee with the freedom that they want to work the crowd? And sometimes, you know, you'll see it. I mean, presidents are going to wade into the crowd, and it's just the way it is. You just do the best you can. What you try to do is, if you're going to do something that's dangerous like that, and this is just common sense, this isn't, you know, tactics and procedures, but if you're going to do something that's dangerous, do it spontaneously, you know, and that way the jackal is caught off guard and doesn't know you're doing it because nobody knew you were going to do it. I mean, there were times where working a protectee, they would stop the motorcade, jump out of the limo, run over to the crowd and start shaking hands. Well, on the one hand, that's a very dangerous thing to do. But on the other hand, nobody's expecting that. So, you know, the jackal isn't waiting there with his gun because it's so unexpected. And so, you know, you can sometimes reduce danger by playing off the unexpected nature of the act. And you can do that a little intentionally too, by just saying, you know, the protectee may say, here's what I want to do. And the Secret Service is like, that's fine, but we're not going to tell anybody. We're not going to tell the press. We're not going to tell anybody, you know, when it comes time, you know, you just do that. And the only people that know are going to be the agents.
Right.
So, you know, it's a balance.
When you're looking at a crowd of people, what are the types of things you're looking for somebody who could be lying in wait? Is it, I'm sure it's like anything else, the totality of the circumstances, but I'm wondering what the biggest like red flags are that these guys are looking for, if you can share.
Don't tread on me, Patch.
Yeah. It's, well, it's kind of the same thing, you know, and it's probably why the Secret Service hires a lot of, you know, former cops, because it's kind of the same thing that, you know, you're always looking for the thing that doesn't look right. You've got, you know, 100 people in the crowd and they're all acting a certain way, except one guy isn't.
Right.
And
you got a bogey.
There's something wrong. You know, they're all, you know, cheering and clapping and all this, and maybe one guy's not, or maybe it's something they're wearing. You know, it's a hot day, but they're wearing a trench coat. Anything that just doesn't look right as you scan. So you see these guys, they're scanning the crowd, and what they're looking for is what doesn't look right.
Yeah.
And that's a skill that you kind of have to learn. But you know, you're just always looking for the thing that seems a little different. And then when you get close to the crowd, you're looking for that, but you're also watching hands, because if somebody's going to do something, they're going to have to do it with their hands. And that's why
Right.
you'll see anybody who's into protection, they always kind of have their hands up, maybe chest level, abdomen level. They're always just watching hands, and because that's where the threat's going to come from, so
Yeah, that
just
makes
stuff
sense.
like that.
Yeah, I wonder if at a certain point, it's like that makes me think of the Malcolm Gladwell book Blink, where even if you don't know what looks off about something or somebody, it just becomes like a sixth sense if they've been doing it long enough. Just scanning a crowd, like this guy looks weird. I'm not really sure why, so I'll just kind of
Yeah.
take a longer look at him.
Yeah, and you put some common sense out there. Could a little old lady be an assassin? Yeah. Is it likely? Probably not.
Right.
It's like the Marines used to say. We're always looking for MAMs, MAMs, military age males.
Yeah.
Their threat is going to come from some guy who's age 20 to 35. That's their threat.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a kid, yeah. Could be a woman, yeah. Could be an old person, yeah. But
the probability is...
Yeah, the 80-20 rule,
Yeah.
rule, 80% of them are going to be MAMs, military age males. That's just life in the big city, so.
Yeah, some people, they call it profiling in a negative way, but I mean, it's just kind of the reality.
Yeah, it's common sense. Common sense.
I'm curious. I have two questions. One, I guess I'll save maybe for a little bit later. But one is there any place or area in general, like when you were going, you'd be like, oh shit, like I guess maybe in the 80s, Detroit probably springs to mind as a place you wouldn't want to be, or like, is there a certain place where you'd kind of groan, or like, oh man, this is going to be trouble from like past experience or reputation, or like scuttlebutt maybe you heard from other agents during the course of your tenure?
Yeah, that's a funny question because a lot of it has to depend on who the protectee is and where they're going. And like I said, I did about 9 months on Jesse Jackson's detail when he was running for president in 1988, his second run.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to a lot of places that you might consider dangerous, but they loved him.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no danger, no threat. I mean, they loved this guy. The only time I ever saw a crowd get hostile or verbal, I wouldn't say hostile, but verbal anti-Jackson is when he spoke at a nuclear plant, and he was anti-nuclear. And it's kind of like, know your audience.
Yeah.
It's like you don't go to a bus driver convention and talk about getting rid of buses.
Yeah.
That's not, you're not going to be well received. And so that was mild, really. I mean, people ask me, you guys, you spent 9 months with Jesse Jackson. That must have been scary. It's like, kind of the opposite. He went to places where he was invited and places where they loved him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, and he was an okay guy, so it.
I think I remember. That's weird. I forgot that completely. I think you had told me that, Steve, like when we were working together all those years. Like, yeah, my dad worked for the Secret Service and Jesse Jackson. I completely fell out of my brain, but he seems like like the figure that he was kind of a controversial figure to some people, I guess, but I always thought he seemed like a cool dude for sure. But he seemed like if you were on a certain detail, that would be the one that you'd be extra on your guard for, because he was such a controversial figure, and during that time a black man too, like going to certain places like in the Deep South. I'm sure I'd be a little worried about going to, like, I don't know, like Mississippi, somewhere in there, like Birmingham, Alabama, like places like that. But
we went to all those places, but I'll tell you, the where we went in those towns, they loved him and, had invited him. And so it really wasn't, I mean, sometimes the biggest problem was that he would draw pretty good sized crowds, and, there's danger in crowds.
Mm-hmm.
But, otherwise, it wasn't, it wasn't a problem. And like I said, I didn't really agree with his politics, but that issue aside, he was an okay guy. He was very respectful of the agents.
Mm-hmm.
Not all protectees are. Some protectees, especially foreign nationals who get a Secret Service detail, seem to look at them as servants.
Like the help, yeah.
The help. And sometimes you have to dispossess them of that pretty quickly. But Jackson was on board. I'll tell you one funny story. When Jackson announced that he was running, this would have been November, I think it was November of 87, long before the election, a year before the election. But whenever it was he announced, Secret Service immediately put a detail on him, and that I got assigned to that detail. And so we had to fly out. Jesse Jackson made his announcement, I believe, in Washington, D.C., but that's where we picked him up. That's where his first detail was assigned to him, was in Washington, D.C. Well, he lived in Chicago. So we met up with him. It was a late afternoon in DC. We're new to him. He's new to us. We're all trying to, and, it's a big group. We're all trying to get to know each other. And so, the plan was we're going to work him from DC. We're going to work him in a motorcade to the airport, and then we're going to fly to Chicago, and then we'll work him to his home, and he's going to go home. And, he had, at that point, a lot of staff, a lot of hanger-ons, strap hangers, I guess, the politicians call them, hanging around him in D.C. And so when it came time to load up the motorcade and head to the airport in D.C., there's all this luggage lined up on the sidewalk. I mean, you can imagine tons of people, tons of luggage. And so, and the agents, we got our luggage too, but that's being handled by what they called a TSA agent. They were a Technical Services Administration. They were assigned to Secret Service, but they were kind of like our help, But anyway, so we didn't worry about our luggage. Jackson, and he had his crew and all that taking care of him. So we work him to the airport. We get on the plane. We fly to Chicago. We get off the plane in Chicago, and it's late. And they're taking all the luggage out of the plane. And one of his staff comes up and says, pointing to his other staff, like, our luggage is not on the plane. And Jackson looks at him and says, well, where was it? And the staffer says, it was on the sidewalk with all the other luggage, and the Secret Service didn't put it on the plane. And Jackson looks at his staffer and says, their job is not to hump your luggage. You carry your own luggage. If you want it, go back and get it. And
nice.
The agents heard that, and all of a sudden, Jesse Jackson's stock goes way up in our book.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Right? And he looks over at us and says, come on, boys, let's go home.
That's awesome. Having someone like that, like,
oh yeah,
because immediately that's someone you want to fight for, or you want to
exactly.
Like, okay, this he's not some pompous, like, pretentious asshole, that's like,
yes. And he was kind of that way for the next 9 months. I mean, he was just very friendly. He was cooperative, because sometimes he'd want to do A and we wouldn't. We would suggest B, and, he was diplomatic and, sometimes could be bullheaded, but, that's just kind of the alpha male that most politicians are. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so he was an okay guy.
Right on. But I guess real quick, back to the question, were there any places where you're like, oh, damn it, we're going to West Texas, or we're going to Oklahoma City? Like, were there places like internally where you'd be like, I'd rather be somewhere else?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of places that, it's like, we're going to El Paso. It's like, oh boy, the thing is though, the funny thing is though, when you're working when you're working a dignitary, a protectee, these guys travel constantly. So you're never in any place long enough to really like it or hate it. You'll work him to an event, and then you'll work him to the hotel, and then you grab a little sleep if you can, unless you're working a night shift. And then the next morning you work them to the airport. Some of these guys, if they're campaigning, they will do 3 or 4 cities a day.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you're just, it's insane, the travel schedule that these guys subject themselves to. It's a marathon.
Yeah, I've thought about it as I've gotten older. Like sometimes, like when I like sit and think about it, and it's like, God, that sounds so lame. Like to be like even like a low level politician that probably still has to travel a lot. I think about that, and it sounds like such a grind. Like
it is a
hotel to airport to event to hotel to airport event, bam, bam, like ugh.
Well,
I went to 1,000 cities, and all I really ever saw was the airport and the hotel.
Right?
It was rare. It was rare we'd ever have a down day. Probably the only time, like with Jackson, we ever had a down day if he was staying at home for like the whole day at home, and you were off during the day. You might be able to look around Chicago a little bit, but that was rare, very rare.
Are there, I guess the flip side of that coin, are there any places that you really liked and you were like, I'm going to come back here later, like Boston or New York or somewhere that like piqued your interest?
Yeah, there are a lot of places that I wanted to see. They're historic, like you say, Boston or something, but a lot of places I wanted to see something other than the hotel and the airport.
Right?
It's like, I would like to come back and see this town someday.
Yeah. I haven't been a lot of places. One of which was Boston that I went to, and it was really cool doing the whole Freedom Trail. What is it? They have like a line. It's like a red line, the Freedom Trail that you can walk, and it takes you through. It's eroded in some places, but yeah, just like that's this being a California boy. I'm sure you can commiserate that. There's history, but when you go to East Coast, it's like a different kind. Like they actually have like there's roads that have like old cobblestones from like the 1800s still on some of these funky little side streets, that just that was one place that I was fortunate enough to go to that was awesome, with like loaded with like American history and just like living histories, like the Paul Revere House still being up, and you can go check it out. Like that was a really fun city. But
yeah, that would be fun.
One other question I had too, and I'll stop because Steve, I'm sure you got a couple other things. Was there anything that's fit to print that you feel comfortable talking about that you kind of overheard, or like from any other dignitary or detail that you had that was interesting, or that gave you a chuckle, or that was kind of controversial during your time, that you feel comfortable enough speaking about that you can talk on?
And you do hear a lot of stuff, because you're close to them.
Yeah.
In the hotel room, you may be in a hotel room with them, or you may be in the limo, driving the limo. Oh, I'll tell you one kind of cute story. And it was when it was with Ronald Reagan, and he was just recently a former president. He'd done his 8 years. So this must have been, George H.W. Bush took the 88 election, so he would have been inaugurated January of 89. So it must have been somewhere right after January 1989 when Reagan was now a former president, but still hugely popular. And the Air Force was getting ready to release the stealth fighter and the stealth bomber. Those aircraft, like the B-2, I think it was the B-2 bomber, the stealth bomber, had been rumored for a long time. Flying out in the desert late at night, people were catching glimpses of this thing, which is really weird looking.
Yeah. It's like a bat.
It looks like a bat. And then the military did reveal, yes, we have this. But before they rolled it out for anybody to see, they invited Ronald Reagan to come to Edwards Air Force Base and have a tour of it as just kind of a thank you for his support of that program, give him a look-see.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was working him at the time, and, we took him out to Edwards Air Force Base. And actually, I was going to a different story, but there's another story in that which is kind of interesting. We work President Reagan out to Edwards Air Force Base, and we meet up with the colonel who's in charge of that wing. And he gives us a little briefing, and real nice guy, gives us some pictures of the B-2, him flying the B-2, and he signed them for us and all this kind of stuff. And then we get back in the limo and go out to these hangars, and super top secret. And so we get out there, and he takes us into this hangar, and here's this B-2 bomber in there. And it's awesome to see one of those things up close. They're just a death machine. They're just awesome looking. They're all black, and they just look like something, that's built for war. And they had the cockpit open. They had the canopy open. Of course, it's way up high. They had the canopy open. They had the stairs up to the cockpit, if I'm using the right terms. And they had a airman posted at the bottom of the stairs who was a very no-nonsense guy.
I bet.
Armed. And so the colonel is walking Reagan around the plane, explaining, what we're looking at. And of course, we're right next to him. And I'm just as interested in the plane as I am in, because I figure we're probably in a pretty safe environment. So I'm not sure I got to be looking for the jackal every second, but
right.
So he's walking around, he's explaining everything. And then the colonel says to Reagan, do you want to go up the stairs and take a look inside the cockpit? And of course, Reagan, is like, oh yeah, I'd love to, and the detail leader puts his hand on Reagan's shoulder and says, hang on a second. And the detail leader sends me up the stairs to go look first. So as I start to climb the stairs, I notice the airman who's armed, who's standing by the stairway, is giving me a dirty look. And I'm like, I wonder what that's, that's odd, Okay, so I go up, I look inside the cockpit, and it looks like, Star Wars. I don't know what I'm looking at,
Right.
I'm just making sure there's no terrorist hiding inside.
Right.
And okay, we did our due diligence. So I come back down the stairway and I get out of the way, and Reagan goes up and takes a look. And this airman is still giving me the stink eye.
Oh man.
It was weird, So anyway, we come out, and later on, when we're back at the office with the colonel, I asked him. I said, by the way, just curious, don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I'm just curious, what was with the look I was getting? And the colonel laughed, and he goes, that airman has been assigned to that plane for years and doesn't have the security clearance to go up that ladder and look inside.
Oh, man.
So you did something he's always wanted to do, but couldn't do it.
Damn, you would think that guy, you wouldn't even let him go look inside the cockpit one time? Oh, man. He was just so salty. He's like, oh, this flat dick Secret Service guy got to see. I've been manning this post for 3 years, and I haven't seen what the...
it was kind of like, man. Oh, I get it, man. I get it. I
get it, yeah.
But,
Do you have any moves? I'd like to see you incorporate them.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's got to be rough for that guy.
Especially it made sense, though.
Because you don't even know what you're looking at. He'd go up there and just nerd out like, oh, wow, they've got the new 5400, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no one here, heading back down.
Right. Yep. And I've been there all of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And this guy has been protecting this thing for who knows how long. And but the colonel thought it was funny. He saw it too. And he thought it was funny, but he's kind of like, hey, you got to understand, he's got a high security clearance, but it ain't that high.
Yeah. Wow.
And,
Man.
but you're talking about, just kind of funny things. Before we were leaving, I was driving the limo that day, and I had, Reagan in the back, and it was just the two of us. And he's a personable guy. And we're just chatting, and I'm just thinking, that's another surreal moment. I'm just sitting in a car with Ronald Reagan in the back,
Reagan,
just chatting away, and somebody had given him, he loved cookies and jelly beans and M&Ms.
Big sweet tooth.
Big sweet tooth. And somebody had given him a bag of cookies with M&Ms in them. So he reaches down, pulls up this bag of cookies, gets them out, breaks one in I don't know if he broke it in half, but he's eating one of them, and he hands me the bag and says, "Have a cookie." And it was just, I thought, you're just a nice guy. You're just a normal, nice guy, But it was like, no, thank you, Mr. President. Just like, are we having this conversation? But it was really cool. He was just a nice guy, but it was one of those moments of, it's pretty nice.
Huh.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I should have had
he's
one.
kind of a different animal too, being like a former actor, not a career politician kind of guy. So I'm curious how he would stack next to different presidents, but because he was kind of like a rock star in his day, and then
smart
president,
guy.
But
he's a smart guy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
that is super surreal.
Yeah, that was kind of fun.
I've always kind of wondered how it works with. I mean, just in the last 30 years, you've seen so many political changes back and forth, how it's ingrained in all these agents. That's like, it doesn't matter who the person is or what their politics are. It's still the job, like, I'm sure you didn't see a lot of, we've got to protect this guy. I don't like what he's about, whoever it may be. You kind of just got to put that to the side. But I wonder if it's like most things when you get to know a regular person and you take the politics out, it's like they're still just a person at the end of the day.
Yeah. You probably had some of that with, because you've got agents of all kinds of ethnic groups, and you've got foreign dignitaries coming in from all over the country. And so you could see where maybe, this president of Bosnia and some agent, may not agree with the politics or whatever, but you just put that aside,
Yeah.
The thing I thought it was always kind of interesting, and it was one of those revelations that kind of snuck up on me that nobody ever said it, but after I had been on a number of protection details of foreign presidents, and I'll just use that term generally because a lot of them call themselves, different.
Chancellor, PM,
exactly. I just call them, just say president, or like Spain, it was the king. He was a nice guy, but
King, hell of a guy.
He was really nice guy. But the thing I started to notice, and if you have a chance, you have more of a chance with a protectee like that to talk to him than you do like the president or the vice president, because they've got 1,000 staff around them all the time. But a lot of these foreign dignitaries that would come in, like the president of Argentina or Spain or some former Soviet bloc countries would come in, and you'd either talk to them or you'd learn. A lot of these guys were educated in America, and it was really interesting. I was talking to it was the president of, I think, what used to be Yugoslavia, if I remember right.
Yugoslavia. What did that turn into? That turned into like Macedonia, or no? I think that was before.
I don't know. And I may even be confusing him with somebody else because there were so many, but he and I got to talking, we're standing somewhere waiting for something. And so, just chit chatting. He was a Stanford grad, and a lot of these other, European or Soviet or South American, Central American, presidents were educated in America and then went back. So their English is impeccable. Smart guys, men or women, and American educated, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy on like a macro how many countries like where your second language that you learn is English, like how it's just almost like a de facto, you got to have this in your bag of tricks. But it looks Yugoslavia was broke up into Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Macedonia, Slovenia, and Montenegro. That's what it was. But that's interesting that he did his schooling in Silicon Valley.
a lot of them are Ivy League or
wow.
And so they would come in and they'd bring their security detail with them, and then we would have our security detail. So you'd always have two, and they don't want to give up protection of their protectee, but they're on our turf. And so there was always kind of an interesting dynamic there. And very often they didn't speak English. So that could be difficult. You
have to bond over like poker or like baccarat or something like.
Well, it's funny you should say that. What you end up bonding over is guns. You start showing them what you're carrying and what you've got, and they'll show you what they've got, and it was kind of the universal language of weaponry.
Yeah. So was there anything cool like standard issues that people had? They're like, "Ooh, that's a bitchin' gun!" Like.
Yeah, it's mostly what you'd expect. I mean, most of it's American made. It's Glocks and Sigs and Brownings and this Smiths, Rugers.
There's that great picture of you in some limo with your aviators on and you're holding an Uzi. How'd you come across that?
How'd that come across what?
The Uzi. Was that standard issue or was that aftermarket?
No, we carried the Israeli Uzi back in the day.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was for an automatic weapon. It's a kind of a slow fire compared to what's out there now, but you can control a slow fire automatic weapon better than you can. If you've ever seen YouTubes of people who don't know how to handle an automatic weapon at a range, you see it always walks up on them.
Flies up. Yeah.
Yeah. Usually, I forget what it's counterclockwise or whatever, but they can spray 30 bullets in 2 seconds and they're all over the place. But the Uzi was slower. It was 9mm, so it's a submachine gun, indestructible, which is why the Israelis carried it. I mean, you can drop it in the mud, drop it in the sand, and so we carried those for many, many years. And of course, the weaponry now is so much more sophisticated.
Yeah.
But they're still shooting, 9s and 9mm and, stuff like that, because one of the reasons a lot of law enforcement, a lot of military carry 9mm is because you can get 9mm all over the world. Everybody's got 9mm. So, that was the thinking. But that was, I was the person with the Uzi is called the gunman. You have different positions for different people. Every agent has a job. And so that picture you saw of me in the limo when I was showing a little barrel was, I was gunman on that. And if you remember the picture of Reagan after he'd been shot, there was the agent holding the Uzi up against the wall. The guy's name was Bobby. And if you pay attention to the picture, Brady's laying there, he's been shot. There was Thomas Delahanty. He was down. He was shot. They had Hinckley down and Bobby's holding the Uzi kind of in a port arms position. It's kind of a famous picture up against that wall.
I don't know if I've seen that. I'll have to look it up.
Look it up. But if you pay attention, in the foreground is an open briefcase. And he was carrying that Uzi in this kind of modified briefcase thing.
Oh.
Because they thought it was a little off-putting to have the agents walking around with an exposed automatic weapon.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an American thing. We, typically you don't see your law enforcement, your Secret Service agents walking around with automatic weapons in front of them.
Do you remember, just before I forget, I think it was during Trump's inauguration. There was that really famous picture of that Secret Service agent walking around, and he had like this big overcoat, and his arms were kind of out in front like this. But a lot of people were speculating that these were fake arms, and that underneath his jacket, he was carrying some heavy firepower. It's a pretty cool picture. If you haven't seen it, we'll have to send it to you, because it does kind of look unusual, and it looks like what it sounds like. You know, these two fake arms kind of just clasped at the hand out in front of him.
Oh, it's interesting.
With some bulk underneath. So it's probably the same idea, because he was walking along the parade or inauguration parade route. But yeah, so this agent had the Uzi in the briefcase and probably had some way of getting it out quick instead of flicking the dials. And
yeah, it was kind of clever. They had that, and then they had this shoulder bag, which was kind of goofy. It looked like some hipsters. What do you call those? Like satchel?
Like a messenger bag, or
like a messenger bag. Kind of went over one shoulder, and it was just
satchel. Indiana Jones had one.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. And it was really clever, because the shoulder strap.
Is this the one here?
I think
there's
so.
A couple. There, he's got it, and it looks like he's about to collapse the stock, and then there's one here where he's holding the Uzi up, kind of.
Yeah, that's not the one. Let me see.
Yeah, I tried looking for. Yeah, there's a bunch of this gentleman with the impeccable stash.
Yeah,
holding the Uzi.
Yeah, I worked with him. He was a good guy.
Wow.
Let's see. Let me.
That's one.
Yeah, it's a picture where he's looking mostly toward the camera on that one, but there's one where he's looking the other way. He's looking toward his left. What about some of these over on the left side here? Well, like that one, yeah. You can't really see it too good, but there's an angle in here where, I don't know what. But anyway, if you see one of these pictures right in front of him, if you go to his feet, if you could get his feet somewhere.
Yeah. I'll have to look later on and see if I'm
you'll
definitely
see,
gonna look for the briefcase.
You'll see a little looks like a Halliburton briefcase, and the lid's open, and that's where he deployed it from. Anyway, it's in there somewhere, but the other, they had other ways of carrying it. Like I said, they had the messenger bag where the strap that went over your shoulder was actually the strap for the gun, and it had a breakaway.
You could just shed the bag, and it was
you put your hand on it. You could you would just grip the gun in the bag, and then if anything happened, all you had to do was straighten your arm out, and the bag would fall away, and the stock would deploy, and you were good to go. Wow. So, stuff like that, because where else are you going to put it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't, put it in a shoulder holster, like you say, Stephen, you'd have this big bulge on you. And of course, everybody traveling with the president, the press, and everybody else, they know what it is. They've been around.
Right.
So.
Well, would you mind telling Jim, just before we wrap up here, would you mind telling Jim the story about, I always want to say it's like a parade route, but it's not. It was just the one in New York City.
New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of those hold your breath kind of things. But it was a presidential motorcade that was going through New York, and counter snipers were set up along the route, up high in buildings, just keeping an eye, because you're going through canyons of buildings where there's, windows on both sides, which could be a problem. So, they had counter snipers all up and down the route. And one of the counter snipers reports he's in one building, and he's looking, he's got eyes on another building, and they're looking for windows that are open. Kind of hard to shoot through a closed window. Not impossible, but, So he's looking at all these windows and sees some that are open. So he's kind of paying close attention to those. And as motorcade's approaching, but it's still a ways off, as he's watching, he sees the barrel of a rifle come out a window, and it's aimed toward the direction the motorcade is going to be coming from. And then the barrel goes back in the window, and he calls it in, and they send NYPD and Secret Service agents into the building, and the counter sniper is telling them it's, this window, so it's this high and this far over, and, and NYPD, is leading the way because they apparently know the building a little better. Or they know how to figure out where the door is for that window, in these apartments.
Well, that's always hell because these goddamn places, they don't mark like the 13th floor in some places. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very common.
Like, God, it bites you in the ass that one time.
So, they're hustling, to get in the building, to get up to the right place. Motorcade's getting closer. Counter sniper is watching. The barrel comes out the window again. And then it goes back inside. The barrel goes back inside. And so he's calling him, the guy's barrel in the window again. And he's scoping down toward, the route. So it's no mystery as to what he's lining up on. Mm-hmm. And, like I said, NYPD and the agents are, getting up there. The sniper gets the green light. The barrel comes out again. You take him out. And so, he's getting ready to take the shot. The agents, NYPD, they get up there, they stack up on the door, boom, they kick the door in, they go in. And what they find is 2 rooms. One room has got mom and dad that are looking out the window, waiting for the motorcade to come by. In another room is their 12-year-old son who's watching with his dad's rifle. And he's just watching, he's watching the motorcade. He's watching for the motorcade through the scope of the rifle.
Oh, man.
And that was one of those where everybody involved was like, just what you did, Jim. Just like, oh.
Jeez. Use a different viewing apparatus next time.
His parents had no idea. His parents had no idea. Next, first thing they know is their door comes down and they're, and they've got, they're looking at, 6 or 8 armed guys putting them down on the ground. And when the dust clears, it's kind of like, our son apparently was looking out the window, waiting to see the motorcade and using the scope on daddy's rifle.
Damn.
Yeah. It was one of those where it's like, I just, to think that counter sniper could have done, he would have done his job, but it's like, he's probably
and then he's got to live with that. Then all the fallout, how it like spread, it just hits all these different people.
Oh yeah.
And if it was a second, or 30 seconds sooner or later or something, that could have unraveled it.
Yeah. Seconds counted on that. And fortunately the kid didn't put that gun back out the window a third time, because that'd have been the last time. And it would have been, can you imagine living with that?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
But
glad it didn't end up that way, but God, man.
Yeah.
That's another proof positive, store your proper gun storage would have nipped that right in the bud.
Oh man. No kidding.
Man.
So on that happy note.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Gosh. That's crazy.
Crisis averted.
Yeah. Crisis averted indeed. Man, that was super interesting. I feel like we could just like keep on going forever, but we're coming up on almost the 2-hour mark. So I mean, I'm down to keep this going. If you ever wanted to come back for a third or however many more we do, I mean, like I said, we got a lot of good feedback from the previous episode. I'm sure people will be intrigued by everything we discussed this evening for sure. So I feel like there's gotta be some more meat on the bone for sure. If you're ever down to come back for another.
Oh, sure.
I think me and Steve were kind of spitballing too about like some other avenues having you come on, like not strictly talking about Secret Service or your life story, but I know. So beyond this though, then you like kind of like a teaser of sorts is so beyond this point, then you transferred into you became a lawyer at some point after this. Was your next career move from Secret Service?
I'm one of those guys who can't figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
No, the truth is he had a second son, and I think his wife was like, "You need to be home more," and he's like, "Fine, I'll give up my dream."
Yeah.
It's all because of you, Steven.
I know.
Yeah.
Without getting too personal, I mean that's got to be hard on the family, like traveling that much. So I mean, was it an easy decision at the end of the day, or?
Yeah, it you know, Steven is joking about it, but you know, it kind of came down to, you know, I had two little boys, and you know, it became pretty apparent, pretty clear. You know, you can either be an agent or a dad.
Mm-hmm. You can't be both.
You know, I mean, I think you can kind of fool yourself to say, well, you know, it's quality time, not quantity. And, you know, if I see him 6 or 8 days a month, you know, we'll have a great time and all that. But it's like, you know, it's nonsense. You know, plus I was out on a protection detail in Denver, and I've been toying with the idea of leaving just because you know, who's home taking care of my family? You know, and I'm sitting out, you know, in Denver on a protection detail of Neil Bush's kids. And the way that came about was, you know, George 41 was president, and he had launched some attacks on Gaddafi in Libya, if I have that right.
Yeah.
And the threat that surfaced was that Gaddafi knew he couldn't go after Bush. That was just too hard. Mm-hmm. But he was going to go after his grandkids, and thought he could get a gut punch in by taking out his grandkids, which probably true. You know, if you want to hurt the guy, you know, don't take out his kids. I mean, that's hard, but you know, take out his little grandkids.
Yeah.
And so, one of his sons, one of George's sons was Neil, who had a wife and a couple of young kids that they figured these two are the highest kidnap potential, because they just lived in a house, you know, in a suburb of Denver. They weren't in a gated community or anything. They just lived in a house, you know. Mm-hmm. And so they put details on the kids, which is the first time I'd ever worked what they call a kiddie detail. So it was kind of interesting, but you know, I am protecting, you know, Neil Bush's kids, and I'm just kind of thinking to myself, who's protecting my kids? Mm-hmm. You know, my wife's home alone. I got two little ones about the age of, well, Neil Bush's kids were a little bit older, but only by a year or two. And it was just kind of like, I'm not doing this. You know, as much as I love it, as fun as it is, you know, as prestigious of a job that it is, and all that, I'd rather be home with my kids going to their little league game, you know, than, you know, looking out for, as important as it is to look out for the president's grandkids, if there's a kidnap threat, as important as that is, somebody else can do it.
Right.
So that's when I made the decision, and tough decision, but like you say, Jim, at the end of the day, it really wasn't a tough decision. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's when I decided I'm going to get a different job and go to law school, and at chapter 3.
Wow, man. So at that point you were like, okay, career change. And then you went to law school, like full on, and like just dove headlong into it. And then, man.
Yeah. Well, I got a job. And actually this was a blessing, because one of the guys I had worked with in Secret Service had retired a couple of years earlier and went to work for an insurance company as an insurance fraud investigator. And he kept telling me, man, you got to come over. It's a great job. It's fun. You get to investigate insurance fraud, where it's a whole unit of ex-cops, ex-federal agents here. He kept, basically saying, if you're ever going to leave Secret Service, man, come over here. Well, I called him up one day and said, guess what? I'm thinking of leaving, and so he introduced me to the boss, and so long story short, the boss hired me as an insurance fraud investigator, which at the time I knew next to nothing about insurance, but I knew how to investigate crimes, and insurance fraud's a crime. And so, I'd be arsons and, stuff like that. And I did that full time while I went to law school at night.
Man.
And to go at night, law school is 3 years if you go full time day program. It's 4 years if you go in the evening program, because you have to go one more year to pick up some extra units. So worked full time, went to law school at night for 4 years, and that was a grind. That was a grind.
How, if you don't mind me asking, how old were you in Denver when the switch flipped? When you're like, okay, course correction.
Let me see, 34.
Wow.
Yeah. I went to law school when I was 34. Graduated when I was 38. Is that right?
Man.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because next year is going to be 30 years that I've been practicing law. Isn't that amazing? Steven, your dad's old.
Yeah.
What's the deal there?
I was just thinking, man, I just turned 38, and you've, like Steve said, you've already lived like 4 of my lifetimes by the time I've gotten to 38, like all these career changes. That's insane. Man.
Yeah, like I said, I can't figure out what I want to be when I grow up, so.
We can't even talk about his Black Ops wet work. That's not even official.
As a mechanic.
We won't go there, Steven.
Fixer.
Yeah, but we'll have to have you back for a part 3. Maybe just kind of recap some stories from all of it, because there's still plenty more to talk about.
Yeah. that would be fine. I'll tell you something. I think being an insurance fraud investigator was probably one of the funnest jobs I ever had. Just because
really?
it was just crazy stuff. What people will do, making fraudulent insurance claims. It was a kick, and it was a very civilized job. I mean, I basically worked, 7 to 5. It was a 4-10 job, if you can believe it. I worked
nice.
4 days, 10 hours a day. So I had not only weekends off, but I had one day in the middle of the week off, which going to law school was perfect. Gave me some extra time. I wasn't on call. I didn't get called out on weekends. I didn't get called out at night. It was very civilized. And I'm working with a team of guys. There was FBI. We ended up picking up another Secret Service agent while I was there. So there were the 3 Secret Service agents, ex-coppers. I mean, it was just such a fun group.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, it was a great job.
I bet there was a lot of cool shop talk between all those different fields coming together.
Yeah.
Cool.
Crazy stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I second that emotion that we should have you back on if you're game, and we can just kind of do a shotgun blast throughout your the course of your. I mean, that's crazy. Like, so it sounds like you're pretty much on a grind from like the end of high school through 38, and then you became a lawyer. Like, just 20 years of just doing the damn thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, fun stuff.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, I've had an awesome time listening, and I appreciate you again making the time, Tom, aka we've dubbed you the Tomfather, the Potter Familius of the show. So yeah,
I like that.
Anyone who's listening and has enjoyed what they've heard, looks like we'll we'll have to plan on something again with Tom in the future. If you guys have any feedback or any questions, maybe for the next episode, please drop us a line. You can reach out to us via email at waxingtheporpoise.com or either of our socials. Instagram is at waxingtheporpoise. Twitter is at waxingtheporp. Thank you again, Tom. It's been awesome just hearing all your exploits throughout the years. Loved having you on.
Been fun. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
What are you ever going to bring back the stash? That's the question.
You think I should?
I think so. It's pretty awesome, man.
I don't know.
I mean, I've never been able to grow. I've always been able to grow a pretty solid beard, but like I can only grow this little pencil thing. So I'm always jealous of someone who can just grow one of those comb cop stashes, you know. So
the push
Steve shared some, and his brother I think fed him some old school photos.
Oh yeah,
of you rocking the stash, and it's pretty tremendous. So
yeah, I think one of the reasons I had a mustache was because I looked like I was 12 years old, you know, when I was.
I thought it was like you become a cop in those days in the 80s. It's like pretty much mandatory. Like,
oh yeah, well there was that.
You gotta wear a hairnet. Yeah,
there was that. But you know, when I was 22, I felt like I looked like I was 12. You know, so it's like I got to do something to, you know, look a little older.
Yeah,
careful what you wish for though, because when the stash comes on, the gloves come off, and it's serious.
All right. Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again for joining us. And we'll have you back on. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, guys. Talk to you later.
Any closing thoughts between you fellas?
No, enjoyed my time.
Looking forward to the next one. And yeah, if anybody has questions, that's a good call.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try to plumb some depths from outside of this to see if we can get some good questions, some good some feeder lines for the next one. But yeah, thanks for listening, and take her easy. We'll see you when we see you, and we will see you later.